Hello, 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 all my favorite people. I'm Kylie here at the Rebel Girls podcast, and today I have with me perhaps one of the most interesting professional people we've had on the show to date. Cyrena, I don't do the introductions though, so please tell us where you are, what your pronouns are, and what exactly it is that you do.
Sure thing. Yeah. I'm Serena Arnold. I'm a meteorologist. I live in New Hampshire, pronouns she, her. Yeah. And I have just been like healthily obsessed with the weather my entire life. I'm going to go ahead and say it's a healthy obsession because it makes me feel better. The weather's just crazy. I mean, and we all love the weather, but as a young kid, I just thought it was the most amazing, crazy thing in the entire world, and I followed that and I pursued that. It was really hard, but ended up getting a degree in meteorology. And I've worked for NASA contractors. I've installed weather stations on the tundra. I was the director of the Mount Washington Observatory. I've been on TV all over the world talking about weather and doing different stuff like that. Yeah, weather's my life.
Weather.
Meteorology, man.
I love it. I am so excited to have you here on the show today. Mostly because, I grew up working on a lobstering boat, and every single day the weather was such a big deal for my life. And I don't know if I've ever met anyone else who probably had weather be such a big part of their life. So this is going to be a cool conversation. But before I go any further, just to make sure you and I are kindred spirits, I need to know, what's your favorite type of weather?
Oh man, wind, like high winds. I live like thunderstormy and all that kind of stuff for sure, but I love when it gets windy.
Love the wind. Interesting. See, I'm a fog person. I think it's because I'm coastal, right? I love
Ooh,
that 62 and foggy. We call it dungeon thick of fog where I come from. But that's
nice.
yeah. All right, my friend. So a big part of the show here on Rebel Girls is we're all about talking about people and what they do and how they kind of defy societal expectations. But in order to really understand where people are now, I always think it's important to think about first where they came from. So, big question for you. Think about little old Serena, age 10. I need three emojis that best kind of describe this funny, weather loving kid. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, you've got 2 of them already in your funny weather-loving kid. Like in a tornado emoji. I mean, why would we not? It's amazing. Loved severe weather. I wanted to be a storm chaser as a career. Turns out that's not really a career. And so the tornado emoji is absolutely number 1. Number 2 is, like, the laughing face because I'm always having a good time with everything I do. I'm a little bit of, like, the golden retriever of a group. Like, I'm always laughing and having a good time. You know, life's too short not to enjoy it. So, enjoy the ride. Put your hands up when you're going up over the hills and down through the lows, like, you gotta enjoy the ride. So, probably, like, the laugh emoji. And then the other thing too is, probably a horse emoji, and this one's kind of out of the blue, make people go, "What?" But I grew up loving horses. We would buy horses from, like, meat market sales and on auctions and stuff like that, and would
Oh,
rehabilitate them and turn 'em around. It's something I continued into adulthood. Horseless at the moment, unfortunately, but, gosh, like, horses and weather were just my entire world when I was 10.
now, when we first spoke a couple weeks back, you told me a really interesting story about how your weather. You said obsession, so I'm going to use the word weather obsession kind of story. Would you mind sharing? Because it's a really awesome story, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I grew up in a house where we moved a lot because of my father's job. Wasn't military, but it was very similar. I was born and raised in the Southern Caribbean, on an island that got really nice weather, a desert island. So it wasn't even in hurricane activity. So the weather was always gorgeous and beautiful. So then we pick up and we move to Denver, Colorado, which is a very different story and a very different situation. And so I'm about 5 years old, and this thunderstorm forms, and the sky is like black and gray, and there's lightning and thunder, and then it starts to like pour rain, and then there's hail, and then a funnel cloud forms, and the funnel touches the ground and turns into a tornado. And I remember just standing in the doorway of my house with my mom as a 5-year-old watching this tornado just go across a field. And I'm like, well, that's the coolest thing I've ever seen. And that completely flipped the switch in me, and I was absolutely obsessed with weather from that moment on.
I love it. Okay. So you get this kid who immediately an obsession, a love, a passion is found. Now, I know you were a little bit younger, you were 5 when this all happened, but there's a lot that happens from 5 to where we are now, and a lot of it sometimes is impacted by what the community or the society around us has to say. So I'm curious, uh, during your development, was there anything said or maybe implied to you that made you feel like you had to be a certain kind of way? Because to be honest, I don't know very many female is that even weather woman? What do we call you? What is the
Yeah, meteorologists.
Yes, there's not very many female meteorologists, correct?
There's not. It is, like most of the STEM careers, it is very male dominated. And I'll never forget one of my college classes. There was like 75 people in there, and I was one of 3 women. So yeah, it was an atmospheric dynamics course, physics and math intensive to say the least. So yeah, there's not many ladies.
No. So if you had this passion, I'm curious, what did maybe you feel like you were supposed to do as you were growing up? Was that something that you kind of had in your mind, or did you just have an eye on the passion and have that kind of bring you forward?
Yeah, it was kind of interesting because growing up, my parents were very encouraging. And my parents grew up in a situation where they were told they could not be what they wanted to be, that they weren't good enough to do so. And so I was very blessed in a lot of ways that I grew up with a family where, if I said I wanted to be an astronaut, my parents would have been like, go get them. And so I did have that, which was really nice to have. And so they were always very encouraging and supportive. But it was hard. I really struggled with math a lot as a kid. And it's funny, I was really good at it until I wasn't. And that's when everything changed. And it turns out that's a huge problem with women. Girls, especially in school, they reach a point where all of a sudden they're bad at math. And that's almost cool now. That's like the cool thing. Like, I'm just a girl and I'm bad at math. And that's horrible. That is so terrible. And so that's like a stereotype that can come about. And I knew I needed my degree in meteorology is a degree in mathematics and physics. And I knew I needed it. And if I couldn't do math, I wasn't going to be a meteorologist someday. And so it killed me. And so it drove me to push through that. And so it was just interesting to see, the girls just fall off the chart basically. Every further math class I got into, there were just less and less girls around me. And it makes me wonder how many, if they would have like pushed themselves or had a better community or had people to encourage them. Because it is really freaking hard. Like, sorry, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. There's math classes out there that are terrible. There's math classes where they don't even use numbers anymore and it's all letters. And I had to go through all that and survive it. And it wasn't pleasant. So it just makes me wonder if we could get past that, like, how would that go? The other thing that was really interesting to me as a kid was I'm older than maybe you think I am, but I was in high school in the 90s. And so it was a time where it was like I remember saying to friends like I wasn't a girl's girl, like I don't like pink. I'm not like other girls. And there was something in society, and I can't pinpoint what it was, and I've reflected about a lot that pinned women against each other and girls against each other at very young ages. And now I look back on it, I'm like, actually, one of my favorite colors is pink, and I actually am a girly girl, and I love my girlfriends. But I didn't realize that at the time, and because it was so, I don't know, it was so much cooler to not be a girly girl. And how insulting,
Yeah.
honestly, looking back.
Yeah, no, I totally understand, and I think felt a very similar experience. I want to roll back for a second because I need our listeners to hear this point. Girls can be good at math. As someone who also my first degree is in math, I think the current research says that right around the 5th grade is when most girls they either fall into one area or the other area. And I think it's like 85% of girls start underperforming in mathematics right around the 5th or 6th grade, which is just absolutely insane when we look at big picture ideas. Because it's not just whether or not you can be a math teacher, it's can you be a meteorologist? Can you be in the sciences? Can you be an astronaut? All of those things so heavily rely on mathematics. So, yeah, all the female listeners, girls can do math.
Oh
We're
my god, we can. Not only that, but we can be darn good at it. If all we have to do is just work at it and get over that hump, and you just have to really ask yourself, am I really not good at it? Is there some sort of external expectation where like it's okay, I can just not be good at it? And I'll tell you what, I never got good at it, if you wanna know the honest to God truth, but I had to push and get through it, and it wasn't fair when all of my friends in college are going out and partying and having a good time, and I'm staying home and studying, so I could just barely get a passing grade on the exam, but I knew I needed that, and math is everywhere. I mean, everywhere today. I mean, tell me a job that doesn't use statistics in some form or another. It's all around us and it can be incredibly intimidating. So if you get through that and are able to do it, one, it's a major accomplishment, is a huge boost to your confidence and your self-esteem. Like getting through math is probably one of the things I'm most proud of in my entire life. I don't have to do it today. I'm not deriving equations anymore, and thank God for it. I'd be terrible if I had to do it. But I had to push and get through it in order to achieve my dreams. And I did, and it was worth the fight.
Yeah, I love that. Oh, I love that sentiment so much. I got to ask your opinion on something just because we're talking about it. So, a little while ago, I mean, you have a pretty impressive following here on TikTok. I know you had to have seen it. Girl math.
No. Oh my god. Oh, well,
Oh,
oh, like the trend. Hold
like
on.
the trend, the girl math.
The girl math. I'm thinking like it's a movie, and I'm like, I'm not in touch
No,
with that.
no, the
No.
trend.
Yeah, the girl math thing. No, that's yes,
It
I have
broke
seen it.
my heart. It like deep-seatedly broke my poor little heart because it's like hair flip. It's okay. We're gonna make it seem cool to not be good at it. It just hurts, right? I
I
can't be
know. It depends. Like, there were some instances where it was funny, because there's sometimes where
over.
it's
Girl.
like there's such differences between males and females, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, and none of them are good or bad. Like, they all contribute to our strengths as a species, okay? Sorry. Going back to, like, the hunting gathering times, women are multitaskers and think of 48 things at one time, even though it may kill us while we're doing it. Men are typically much more linear and straight line, and that's great because they had to go out and kill a deer to feed the rest of us while we're gathering and taking care of the children and doing all, like, we have our strengths based upon evolutionary changes. Okay. That's okay. So if I'm girl mathing and I'm multitasking and I'm saving a few bucks because I did this, and like the way some of them were okay. Some of them like, yeah, that's exactly how my brain works. And some guys just don't understand that. And it's like, you know what? Maybe it's a positive. Maybe it's not necessarily like girl math doesn't have to be like a negative or a derogatory thing. It's like we can actually balance a whole bunch of different stuff in our head and can see the bigger picture to where maybe I'm saving money because of X, Y, and Z. And even though, it makes a guy's head explode, we get it. Maybe
So,
that's girl math.
ladies, that coffee that you convinced yourself not to buy earlier today, I think we just heard it here. Cyrena says, like, go for the purchase because if you divide that over a series of days, it's pretty much cheaper than if you hadn't bought the coffee.
I mean, there you go.
There you
Right.
All right, Serena. So you had some difficulty in some math stuff, but you pushed through. And professionally, let's talk about that trajectory. I don't know what it's like. How do you just get a weather station? Like, what does that look like for a meteorologist?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, the nice thing is meteorology affects everything that we do. We started off the conversation by talking about that. It's like what weather's in everything, and so it's kind of funny. I joke that sometimes I picked water cooler talk as a career. That can be a little frustrating because there's no restaurant I go to, there's no coffee shop I go to where the person in front of you isn't like, "Oh man, you can believe how hot it is, how cold it is, how wet it is, how dry it is." Always followed by, "Yeah, those weather people are always wrong," and it's like, "Oh man, this is rough." So sometimes picking a career like I did like that can be a little difficult, and it's hard to not pipe up every time I hear those things. But there's so many different industries that involve meteorology. I mean, there's a lot of jobs within our federal government that need meteorology. Anytime you see a severe thunderstorm watch or a tornado warning come across, that those are government meteorologists, and the US government employs thousands of them that help to keep us safe and look out for us and tell us what's going on and notify us. There's private sector meteorologists, there's TV meteorologists, everything from being able to have electricity when you flip your light switch on ties back to meteorologists, because today, with today's electricity and power grids having to balance out where's our power coming from, wind, from solar, and all this, if you don't know that forecast, you don't know what's going to be happening, you're not delivering power to those customers.
Oh,
So there's
wow.
literally nothing that we don't do. When you think about transportation and supply chain, we are in every single industry, and almost every industry has to employ meteorologists or have meteorological knowledge in some way. So we're everywhere.
That's amazing. And I do have to say, you guys do kind of get a bad rap. I feel really that's tough. It's not fair to you. I do have a question though, because I just saw this and I may be showing my ignorance a little bit. I have you on the show, so I need to ask. I
Let's do
recently
it.
learned when you see like rain on the forecast, if it says, say, 40%, what does that actually mean?
Yeah, that's a great question. Really good question. So the percentages are really interesting and can be incredibly confusing. And so what it usually breaks down to is if we were to have these same meteorological conditions and the same stuff play out, um, that 4 out of those 10 times it would result in rain for you, where 6 out of those 10 times it wouldn't. Or the forecast models, when you look at what they're kind of projecting and saying, right? Like we can run them with these same conditions, and 4 times out of 10, it's going to result in you getting some rain, which by the way, just started pouring at my house. But 6 out of those 10 times it's not. So it's very interesting because the percentage thing has its flaws. It's not the greatest in the world because is it mean you're going to get like a little shower and you're not even going to be able to measure it? Or is it going to be pouring rain on you, all day today? Is it going to be heavy? Is it going to be light? So the percentages are just kind of an interesting thing. They do confuse a lot of people. So hopefully that helps.
Now, this might be false media that I saw on TikTok because I recently saw that it is the amount of area in that area that will experience that weather condition. You're saying that is not true.
Yeah, generally not. It can be confusing, and depending on where you're getting the information from, it can vary, right? So I'm going based upon National Weather Service um, information provided by like our federal government, NOAA, right? The
Okay.
National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. So if a private entity out there has their own weather app or their own weather program and they say 40% and it may mean something else, that's cool. Maybe it does for them. But generally speaking, for guidance for the National Weather Service, that's what it means.
Okay, so probability. All right, I feel really good. I'm really glad I was able to ask that question. All right, let's talk a little bit about the industry. So you like you said, there's a lot of different ways to be involved in the industry, but as you kind of saw from your past learning experiences, not very many women. So I'm curious, have you seen any bias because you've been doing this for a little bit of time? Have you seen the industry change? Have you seen it become more welcoming to the female demographic? Like what's that been like for you as a professional person?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I've gotten to do some really cool jobs that a lot of women wouldn't have done. Like I'd have to when I was working with an air quality monitoring firm, I would go to the Alaska tundra and stay out there for 2 or 3 weeks at a time. We'd be sleeping in tents, installing weather stations in remote locations. Sometimes we'd have a bear guard with us. Sometimes we'd just be armed to protect ourselves and had to be like trained to do so. I've done some jobs before where it's like there's just not a lot of women that want to do that sort of a thing. And that's fine. I was always okay with that. And earlier in my career, I can't think of any examples of, anything that jumps out at me, but here's the thing that I've realized more and more as I get older. Is it because I didn't realize it or because I didn't see it? Because the older I get, the more I see things that make me go, "Hey now." Now, overall as an industry, things are definitely getting a lot better. Especially science, meteorology, there's a lot of organizations out there that are helping to push and advocate for more women to be in STEM if they are interested and encourage them. And I think that's all really great. So I am seeing some overall changes. But knowing that I was the first female director of the Mount Washington Observatory is, a really interesting thing. Knowing some of the changes they had to make, knowing that a female was coming on board, some things like that. Like, because people are staying up there 7 days at a time. Like, there's just some interesting things that have happened. But what's been more interesting is the further I've worked myself up the ladder, the more I've seen some examples and instances of where things have happened that weren't right and that shouldn't have happened. So earlier in my career, like I said, I'm not sure if I didn't see it, I didn't notice it, or it didn't happen, but I never felt, like I was discriminated against for being a female. It wasn't until I got much, much older and I was on executive teams. Um, and there was one job in particular where I was promised a pay raise. I was promised a promotion at a later date once funding for an organization would come in. And then the time came in for that funding. It was like 6 months later. And then actually, we can't give it to you because there's another guy that I need to hire. And so I'd done the work for 6 months and was promised the pay for it and didn't have it happen. And I can't help but feel like that wouldn't have happened the other way around. That the gentleman would not have been denied the pay raise that they were promised to hire a female coming in for another role. So there have been some interesting things like that have happened that were very eye-opening and difficult. But You can't control everybody out there. You can only do your best. And what I did was made the choices that I needed to do with where I was employed.
Good
When
for you.
something like that happened, that's not an organization that represents me or my values, and it was time to move on.
That's fantastic. You should be really proud of yourself for being able to make that decision. Coming as someone who's also spent some time in upper management like roles, I have noticed the older I get as well, and those higher level conversations that you're a part of, the way things are managed sometimes does it is different gender based, and it isn't until we're able to change those workplace cultures by like advocating for ourselves and the people around us that we can make those broader changes for an organization. So good for you. That's really unfortunate it happened, but it's great that you were able to stand up and do the right thing for you.
Yeah, no, I had to. And you know what? And I was much happier after the fact. So,
Yeah, that's really cool. So, I feel like we have a lot of environmentalists, a lot of people who are going to be listening to this show. They're really interested in like the impact that our current weather patterns, what we're seeing right now, how that's going to impact us in the future, and what maybe we can think about as we start to try and hopefully figure out this whole climate crisis that we have in front of us. So what words of wisdom, what is there anything that you'd like to share about climate change or weather conditions or what we can maybe see on the horizon? Like any thoughts there?
yeah, the best thing that I could do is actually help people understand the difference between weather and climate because they are two actually very different things, and they get confused and put together inappropriately to kind of serve both sides of the aisle, so to speak. So with meteorology, with weather, we're using temperature, wind speed, right, relative humidity. We're talking about all the same parameters. As a climatologist, they talk about the exact same things. And so people think, oh, you can just mix these and bring them together. And you actually can't because with meteorology, we're talking short term, generally speaking, very short term. We're talking this week, 2 weeks out max. We're talking, the now in the present, where climatologists are looking at decades of trends. So 30 years absolute minimum of trends before you can look and determine what climatology is. And so it's these two very different things. So every time you get that freak snowstorm and people go, "Oh my god, ha ha ha, climate change, global warming." No, that's not how that works. You can't use a one-off event to support an agenda on one side or the other, an extreme heat wave or any like it's just they're two totally different things. Um and so I think making sure people understand those differences and leaving the climate to the climatologists. Let's leave the science with the scientists. Can
I
we just
love
do that in general
that.
everywhere?
Wouldn't it be nice if
Please. That'd
we
be
need
amazing.
professional people to do their darn jobs? They earn the degrees. But I am so glad you used exactly the phrase I was hoping that you would. The freak snowstorm or the heat wave. All the time we hear people say, "Oh, it's climate change," but knowing that difference, you did such a good job of explaining that. Thank you. That was
Yeah, I mean, and it's interesting. Just it drives me absolutely nuts when it's like you get the heat wave and people are like, "Oh my god, see?" And it's like, "Okay, yeah, but then when people also get like the snowstorm and it's like, "Oh, it's a bunch of fooey." And it's like, because when you actually talk to a climatologist, which I am not, right? So meteorology and climatology, it's another thing. Like to talk to a meteorologist about climatology is like going to your dermatologist for a broken arm. Like, okay, they're going to give you better information than some person off the street because they are medically trained, right? I am atmospherically trained like they are. But really, to get down to the heart of it, you got to talk to a climatologist. And the climatologists say that, with changing climates, you are going to get more of the extremes on both sides. And so we can't use these different events to kind of pick and choose things. The climatologists, the professionals out there talk about how you're going to have more instances of that polar vortex laxing and getting those crazy cold temperatures as the climate changes. And so it's just all very interesting. It's a very great, interesting aspect of science all on its own.
awesome. Awesome. Okay, well, you've ran us through a lot, weather, life related, a lot of different things we've talked about. Now, I need to know right now, what are some big projects that are going on in your life or that you're looking forward to?
Oh man. The biggest thing right now is probably my children's books. So I've written two children's books and the second one just came out. Um Sorry, I should have brought these out in advance. But I just wrote a book called The Hurricane Story. And so it's all about like everything kids need to know about hurricanes from a scientific perspective and also a preparation perspective. So we do some crazy things in here and it's it's like lyrical and rhymes and is easy for kids to read. And we're talking about cloud condensation nuclei in this book. And kids are going to learn from it. And it's crazy cool. And I'm super proud of it. And it just came out. And so it's the sequel to my first book called The Hurricane Story, or The Weather Story, which is the first book that I did. I released that one in March of 2020, right in the middle of COVID, because my timing is just awesome.
Awesome.
And so I thought I thought the spring of 2020 would be a great time to promote a weather book and make tours around bookstores and do all that. Turns out I was wrong. These are two books that I have that are just absolutely great. They're fun for kids of all ages, like 2, 3, 4 year olds are going to love the pictures. When you start getting, the elementary age kids are going to start understanding the scientific concepts behind what's going on there. They're easy to read, they're approachable, and it tells kids the truth, right? It's not, hey, thunder is, God stomping his feet upstairs. No, thunder is hot expanding air that comes from bolts of lightning. Like, we need to be scientifically accurate for kids and understand that they're going to handle it and it's going to be okay. And
Yes.
so that's probably the biggest thing I'm proud of is these two books for kids.
Oh, I'm so happy that you shared that, because I know we have a lot of parents who are listeners. So what we're going to do is we're going to make sure that we link those up in the summary or the bio for Cyrena. If you guys want to check it out, in case they don't check it out in our comments, Amazon, where's the best place to purchase these?
Yeah, eventually we'll probably have them on Amazon. Right now we're just doing the distribution ourselves. Go to francisfoxstories.com. That's FRANCES. That's the name of my main character. francisfoxstories.com. And that's where you can order both copies of the book.
Fantastic. All right. Well, Cyrena, it's been such a wonderful pleasure speaking with you today. And I have just one last question to wrap us up. So, you were a young kid with a big passion, and you actually made your dreams come true, even though there were some big challenges there. So, what piece of advice do you have for someone who's maybe experiencing a similar situation? What should they know?
Yeah, that's a great question. And right away there's two. Can I have an answer of two?
Please, yes, give us two.
There's two that jump out at me. The first is, if you love what you do for like a career, you're never going to spend a single day at work. It's a bit of an exaggeration because even I have bad days at work, even though I love what I do. It's work. Okay. It's not play. But it does make the bad days a lot easier. So, if you find something that drives you, that you're passionate about, something that interests you in some way, it's going to be a lot better when times get hard. So do what you love and you'll never spend a day at work is number one. The second thing, and this was a poster that hung up on my middle school hallway on the wall opposite of my locker. And I never forget it. When I toured the middle school for the first time, I was like a fifth grader going into sixth grade. And the poster said, "Stand up for what is right, even if you're standing alone." And it like knocked me off my feet. And that has lived with me forever. And really is a big core around everything that I do. So it doesn't matter who's looking. It doesn't matter. Like, do what's right,
Do
whether
it.
it's what's right for you, whether it's what's right for society, whether it's right for whatever that may be. Um, Even if you don't have the cheering squad, even if you don't have somebody behind you, even if it's not what everybody else is doing, stand up for what's right, even if you're standing alone.
There you are. Well, Cyrena, thank you again so much for your time and wisdom today. It's been a genuine pleasure. Now, Rebel Girls, you're going to make sure that you check out the books in the bio. And until next time, everyone, keep being the rebel I know you are.